chosen one. Pause for a moment and listen carefully, because something has just shifted in the unseen realm concerning your name. This is not an ordinary message, and the fact that you are hearing these words right now is not coincidence. Heaven has a way of interrupting the ordinary at the exact moment truth is ready to rise. Anointed One. For a long time you carried a story about yourself that was written by someone else's lies. You were labeled the difficult one, the black sheep, the one who caused tension simply because you refused to participate in what your spirit knew was wrong. And while others repeated a narrative about you, heaven was quietly recording the truth of what you endured. But something has changed. In the last hours, a veil has begun to lift. The same God who declares through the book of Ecclesiastes that there is a time for every purpose under heaven has reached the moment where hidden things can no longer remain buried. A family member is beginning to see what was once concealed, and the weight of that realization is shaking their heart. Chosen One. You may have felt a strange release in your spirit recently, as if a burden you carried for years is suddenly loosening its grip. Stay with this message. What is unfolding around your family right now is not random. It is divine vindication beginning to surface. Monty Chosen One. There is a reason the atmosphere around your life has begun to feel different lately. Something that once pressed against your chest like a heavy stone is starting to lift, and even if you cannot fully explain it, your spirit recognizes that a shift has begun. For a long time, you carried a weight that no one around you seemed willing to acknowledge. You walked into rooms where conversations stopped, where eyes looked through you as if they had already decided who you were, without ever listening to your heart. You know that feeling, Anointed One, the strange ache of being discussed in places where you were never invited, the quiet pain of realizing that the story being told about you did not match the truth you lived every day. Many nights you lay awake wondering how the narrative became so twisted, how the people who shared your blood could look at you through a lens so distorted. But what you must understand right now is that heaven never lost sight of the truth. There were moments when you felt like the only witness to your own integrity. You tried to explain yourself, but your words seemed to bounce off walls of assumption. So eventually, you stopped explaining, you stopped defending, you carried your pain in silence and learned to speak to God about things you could no longer say to people. I know that season well, Chosen One. I remember times in my own life when I sat in a quiet room after everyone had gone home, asking heaven why truth sometimes travels so slowly while lies seem to sprint ahead. In those moments, it feels like injustice has the final word. But heaven works on a different clock, and the God who sees in secret never leaves a story unfinished. What has been happening around your life is not just emotional tension or family misunderstanding. There has been a spiritual strategy at work, a pattern designed to place the burden of every conflict onto your shoulders. Whenever there was confusion in the family, somehow your name was attached to it. When emotions rose in the room, fingers quietly pointed in your direction. Over time, a label began to grow around you. Maybe they called you too intense, too sensitive, too difficult to understand. Perhaps they whispered that something about you was unstable. But what they did not recognize was that the discomfort they felt around you had very little to do with your behavior. It had everything to do with the light you carried. Chosen One. When a person refuses to participate in dysfunction, they become a mirror for everyone else in the room. And mirrors have a strange effect on people who are hiding things from themselves. Some will look at that reflection and decide to grow. Others will decide that the mirror is the problem. Many of you watching know exactly what that feels like. You tried to speak honestly about things that were hurting the family, and suddenly you became the one causing division. You set healthy boundaries, and somehow those boundaries were interpreted as rebellion. You refused to pretend everything was fine, and suddenly you were labeled the troublemaker. But heaven has been observing this entire pattern, and the season of quiet observation is ending. What your spirit has been sensing recently is the beginning of exposure, somewhere perhaps in a conversation that was never meant to reach the surface, perhaps in a message accidentally revealed, perhaps through a moment of divine clarity that arrived in the middle of the night. A family member has begun to see what was previously hidden, and when the veil lifts like that, it is rarely a gentle experience. Truth arrives with weight. It forces people to re-examine memories they once interpreted incorrectly. It causes them to replay moments they dismissed before. Right now, that family member is looking back through the history of your relationship with new eyes. They are remembering conversations where you tried to explain yourself but were interrupted. They are recalling the times when you stepped away from gatherings, not because you wanted distance, but because you needed peace. They are realizing that while they were listening to whispers about you, you were carrying burdens they never bothered to ask about. And as those realizations begin to stack on top of one another, something heavy begins to happen inside the heart. Conviction starts to rise. Chosen one. The tears you sense from them are not small emotions. They are the sound of a conscience waking up. When a person suddenly realizes they believed a lie about someone who loved them, the realization hits like a wave. They begin asking themselves questions they never considered before. How did I miss this? Why did I believe that story so easily? Why did I not look deeper into the situation? That is the moment when the architecture of deception begins to collapse. For years, a certain voice may have been influencing the atmosphere around your name. Perhaps there was someone in the family who always seemed to carry information about you, someone who appeared concerned, but somehow always managed to plant seeds of suspicion. They presented themselves as the calm observer, the neutral messenger, the one simply sharing what they had heard. But behind that calm exterior, there was something else working quietly: division. This is a pattern that has existed in families for generations. One person learns how to position themselves as the interpreter of everyone else's behavior. They become the storyteller. They filter events through their own perspective and distribute those interpretations to others until their version becomes accepted as truth. And once that pattern is established, the entire family dynamic begins to orbit around the narrative they created. But what happens when that narrative begins to crack? What happens when someone suddenly sees evidence that contradicts everything they believed? Chosen one, that is where you are standing right now. The moment when a long-standing illusion begins to unravel. The person who once repeated those stories about you is now seeing pieces of reality that no longer fit the old script. And the more they examine those pieces, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. They are recognizing that the information they trusted may have been shaped by jealousy, insecurity, or fear. They are beginning to realize that the person who spoke most confidently about you may have been protecting their own image the entire time. That realization is not easy for them to accept. Pride resists it. Ego resists it. But truth has a way of continuing to rise once it has been uncovered. It starts small, like a quiet whisper in the mind. Then it grows into a question that refuses to go away. And eventually, it becomes a realization that changes everything. Right now, the Spirit of God is allowing that realization to take root. The person who once nodded along with accusations about you is starting to see the pattern that was hidden beneath the surface. They are connecting moments that once seemed unrelated. They are recognizing that the person who criticized you the most was often the one creating conflict behind the scenes. They are remembering conversations where details did not quite add up. And suddenly, the entire picture shifts. What once looked like your problem now begins to look like manipulation. What once sounded like concern now feels like control. What once seemed like harmless gossip now reveals itself as a strategy of separation. Chosen. One heaven has allowed this moment to arrive because the season of distortion cannot continue forever. When God decides it is time for truth to stand, even the most carefully constructed stories begin to fall apart. The same God who declared through the Gospel of Luke that nothing hidden will remain concealed is now bringing that promise into motion in your life. And the first sign that truth is rising is not celebration, it is tears. Because when someone finally sees what they missed, the weight of that realization can break their heart open. And what is unfolding in that heart right now is only the beginning, or chosen one. The moment truth begins to awaken inside a person who once misunderstood you is not a quiet experience. It is unsettling. It shakes the ground beneath everything they thought they knew. That family member who is now weeping is not simply reacting to one new piece of information. They are watching an entire structure of belief collapse in front of their eyes. Memories they once interpreted one way are now revealing a completely different meaning. Conversations that once sounded like evidence against you are suddenly revealing the fingerprints of manipulation. This is the painful process of awakening, and you must understand something important in this moment, Anointed One. When heaven begins exposing deception, it rarely does it halfway. The Holy Spirit begins rewinding the tape of history inside a person's mind. Moments from years ago start returning to their memory, but this time the fog is gone. The context is clearer. The voice that once sounded trustworthy now sounds suspicious. The details that once seemed harmless now feel calculated. Right now, that family member is remembering things they once dismissed. They are remembering the way certain conversations about you always seem to happen when you are not present to speak for yourself. They are recalling how the same individual who warned them about you was often the one creating tension in other relationships as well. Patterns are beginning to appear where they once saw isolated incidents. Chosen one, when a lie survives for a long time, it usually does so because it is supported by repetition. The same narrative is repeated again and again until it begins to feel like fact. That is how deception builds a stronghold inside families. One voice whispers suspicion, another voice agrees with it, and soon the entire atmosphere begins to reflect that distortion. Before long, no one remembers where the story even started. But truth has a different nature. Truth may travel slowly, but once it arrives, it carries a kind of weight that lies cannot sustain. And that is exactly what is happening now. This family member is beginning to see the origin of the story that once shaped their opinion about you. They are realizing that the person who spoke most often about your supposed flaws was often projecting their own fears and insecurities onto your character. This realization brings a deep sense of sorrow, because suddenly they understand something they did not recognize before. While they were believing the accusations against you, you were still loving them from a distance. While they were repeating things they heard about you, you were praying for their well-being. While they were doubting your intentions, you were carrying burdens they never saw. That realization is heavy, chosen one. It is the kind of moment that makes a person sit in silence, replaying their actions again and again in their mind. They start asking themselves difficult questions. Why did I not ask them directly? Why did I assume the worst? Why did I trust someone else's interpretation instead of listening to their heart? But even this painful reflection has purpose, because conviction is often the first step toward healing. The tears you sense from this family member are not simply regret. They are the beginning of transformation. When a person's conscience wakes up, it creates a space where truth can finally take root. You must also understand that what you endured was not random misunderstanding. There was a spiritual pattern behind it. Throughout history, people who carry clarity and conviction often become targets for projection. When someone refuses to participate in unhealthy dynamics, it forces others to confront realities they would rather avoid. And sometimes the easiest way to escape that discomfort is to place blame on the person who exposed it. You were never meant to carry that blame. You were simply the one who refused to pretend everything was fine when it was not. That courage may have made others uncomfortable, but it also made you a catalyst for change. And now, heaven is allowing that change to begin. The person who once influenced others against you is starting to lose their grip on the narrative. Their contradictions are becoming visible. The small details that once seemed insignificant are now forming a pattern that cannot be ignored. This is why the atmosphere around the situation feels different. When deception begins to lose its power, the energy of the entire environment shifts. Chosen one. You may even feel that shift inside your own body. Some of you have noticed a strange release of tension lately. Your shoulders feel lighter, your breathing feels deeper. The constant pressure you once felt when entering certain spaces is starting to fade. That is not imagination. It is the physical response of your spirit, recognizing that the burden of false accusation is being lifted. For years you carried the emotional weight of other people's assumptions. You walked into rooms knowing that conversations about you had already taken place. You felt the silent judgments in the air, even when no one spoke them aloud. That kind of environment creates a heaviness that is difficult to explain. But that heaviness cannot remain once truth begins to surface. The same family member who once listened quietly to accusations is now looking at those accusations through a completely different lens. They are realizing that the person who appeared most concerned about your behavior was often the one stirring the most confusion. And the more they examine that realization, the clearer the pattern becomes. Chosen one. The enemy believed that if he could isolate you from your own bloodline, he could weaken the assignment on your life. Isolation is one of the oldest strategies used against people who carry purpose. If you can convince someone that they are alone, that no one understands them, that everyone has turned against them, it becomes easier to silence their voice. But heaven has a way of reversing what darkness tries to establish. What once looked like rejection is now being revealed as protection. What once felt like abandonment is now being understood as a season where God was preserving your heart while truth slowly made its way to the surface. And right now, that truth is knocking on the door of a conscience that can no longer ignore it. Chosen one. What is unfolding inside that family member's heart right now is deeper than simple regret. It is the slow, painful awakening that happens when a person realizes they were standing on the wrong side of truth. This kind of realization does not arrive quietly. It moves through the mind like a storm, pulling old memories out of places they were buried and forcing them into the light. They begin to replay moments they once ignored. Words you spoke that once sounded defensive now sound honest. The distance you created that once looked cold now looks like self-preservation. You must understand something, anointed one. When a person finally sees the truth after years of believing a distortion, their heart goes through a kind of spiritual shaking. Their pride begins to crumble. The certainty they once carried about the situation disappears, and in its place comes humility. That is why the tears are flowing. not because they suddenly feel sorry for themselves, but because they are recognizing the depth of what you carried while they misunderstood you. Right now, they are remembering the times you tried to explain yourself but were quickly dismissed. They are remembering the look in your eyes during family gatherings when you sensed that something was wrong, but no one would say it out loud. They are recalling moments when you stepped away quietly instead of arguing, moments that once looked like withdrawal but were actually acts of dignity. Chosen one. There is something powerful about the kind of silence you maintained. It was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of restraint. You knew that defending yourself against a story already accepted by the crowd would only create more chaos. So you carried the weight quietly and placed the situation in the hands of God. That decision may have felt lonely at the time, but heaven saw every moment of restraint. There is a verse that many people quote when they are facing injustice, and it comes from the book of Isaiah chapter 54, where it declares that no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment shall be condemned. Most people imagine that condemnation happening through confrontation. They imagine a dramatic moment where the truth is shouted from the rooftops. But often, heaven condemns the lie in a quieter way. It allows the truth to reveal itself inside the conscience of the very people who once believed the accusation. Instead of you defending yourself, the evidence begins to rise around them until they cannot ignore it anymore. That is exactly the stage you are entering now. The family member who is awakening to the truth is starting to recognize the pattern that existed around your name. They are noticing that the same individual who criticized you often seemed to benefit from the division they created. They are remembering subtle comments that once sounded like concern but now feel like manipulation, and the more they examine those memories, the clearer the pattern becomes. Chosen one. There is a reason this realization feels so intense for them. It is because they are discovering that they participated, whether knowingly or unknowingly, in a narrative that wounded someone who loved them. That kind of awareness can make a person feel sick to their stomach. It creates a deep sense of responsibility. But do not despise those tears. They are part of the healing process. When the heart breaks open like this, it creates space for repentance. The person who once believed the story about you is now beginning to understand the cost of that belief. They are seeing how their silence may have allowed the narrative to grow. They are recognizing how easily they trusted someone else's interpretation instead of seeking the truth directly from you. And yet, even in this painful realization, there is a quiet miracle unfolding, because the same tears that reveal regret also prepare the ground for restoration. Chosen. One heaven is not only exposing deception, it is also softening hearts. The person who once looked at you through suspicion is now beginning to see you through compassion. They are realizing that while they were questioning your motives, you were still carrying love for them. While they were listening to whispers about you, you were quietly praying that one day the truth would surface. That kind of love leaves a mark on the conscience. It cannot be easily forgotten. Now, something inside them is shifting. The walls that once separated you are beginning to crack. The certainty they once held about the situation has dissolved, and in its place comes a question they cannot escape. What if we misunderstood them all along? That question is the doorway to everything that comes next. And once that door opens, the truth will continue to move forward until the entire story is rewritten. Chosen one. When truth finally enters a situation that has been ruled by misunderstanding for years, it does not just correct a small detail, it rearranges the entire landscape. The family member who is waking up to reality is now standing in a place where the past looks completely different from the way they once remembered it. What they thought was your rebellion now appears as courage. What they once called distance now looks like protection. The silence they once interpreted as stubbornness now feels like grace. You must understand that this kind of awakening is both humbling and overwhelming. Imagine suddenly realizing that someone you quietly judged was actually carrying burdens you never asked about. Imagine remembering the times they tried to explain themselves and realizing you were too distracted by someone else's narrative to listen. That kind of realization does not simply pass through a person's mind. It settles into the heart like a weight that demands change. Right now, that family member is connecting the dots. They are seeing the pattern that once hid beneath the surface of everyday life. Every time you moved closer to healing the family dynamic, someone seemed to create a new crisis around your name. Every time you tried to build trust, again whispers of suspicion appeared out of nowhere. The pattern was not random, it was strategic. Chosen one. There are people who carry a spirit of division without even realizing the damage they caused. They become comfortable controlling the narrative in a family, shaping how people see one another. Over time, they learn how to present themselves as the voice of reason, while quietly planting seeds of doubt about others. It is a subtle kind of influence, one that grows slowly until the entire atmosphere begins to reflect it. But deception always carries one weakness: it cannot survive exposure, and that is exactly what is happening now. The person who once carried that influence is beginning to lose their grip. Their words no longer land the same way. Their explanations are starting to sound inconsistent. The stories that once felt convincing are now revealing cracks that cannot be ignored. Chosen one. When a lie survives for a long time, people become accustomed to it. It begins to feel normal, like part of the environment. But once the truth shines light into that environment, everything shifts. The same story that once seemed believable now feels strange. The same accusations that once sounded convincing now feel exaggerated. This is the moment when the structure of deception begins to collapse, and you may be sensing that collapse even in subtle ways. Perhaps you have felt a strange calm lately, as if something in the air has changed. Maybe the constant pressure you once felt around certain family members has started to ease. That is not coincidence. Your spirit is recognizing that a shift has begun in places you cannot yet see. Chosen one. Heaven has been working behind the scenes in ways that were invisible to you. There were conversations you never heard, moments when the Holy Spirit stirred questions in someone's heart, moments when details surfaced that could no longer be ignored. Piece by piece, the truth has been assembling itself like a puzzle. And now that puzzle is starting to form a clear picture. The family member who is awakening is beginning to see that the person they trusted to interpret your character may have been acting from jealousy or insecurity. They are noticing how often your successes were minimized, how often your boundaries were interpreted as disrespect, how often your words were twisted to create tension. And once someone begins to see that pattern, they cannot unsee it. Chosen one. The reason this moment matters so much is because the enemy believed isolation would weaken you. The strategy was simple. If you could be separated from the people who shared your bloodline, your voice would become easier to ignore. If the narrative about you could be controlled, your influence would slowly fade from the family dynamic. But the enemy underestimated something powerful: endurance. You endured the misunderstandings, you endured the accusations, you endured the loneliness that comes from being misrepresented. And through all of it, you kept your heart from becoming bitter. That decision alone changed the outcome of this entire story, because bitterness would have confirmed the lie. Instead, you carried your pain quietly and allowed God to become your defender. You placed the situation in His hands even when it felt unfair. And now heaven is responding to that faith in a way you could not have orchestrated yourself. The person who once believed the accusation is now becoming a witness to the truth. They are beginning to see you not through the lens of someone else's story, but through the evidence of your character. They are noticing the consistency in your life, the quiet strength you carried, the patience you showed, even when the situation did not deserve it. And that recognition is beginning to break something open inside them. Chosen one. This is the turning point where misunderstanding begins to transform into respect. The same person who once doubted you is now beginning to realize that the strength they overlooked in you may have been the very thing holding the family together. And when that realization fully settles into their heart, it will change the way they speak about you from this day forward. Chosen one. What your family member is experiencing right now is more than a change of opinion. It is a deep confrontation with reality. When the veil lifts from someone's eyes, they do not simply adjust their perspective, they begin to feel the full weight of the time that was lost. They start remembering the holidays where tension lingered in the air and no one spoke about it. They recall the family gatherings where your absence was quietly explained away with a story that now feels incomplete. And suddenly, they realize something painful. The distance that formed between you was not inevitable. It was manufactured. This realization creates a kind of grief that many people do not expect. They are not only grieving the misunderstanding itself, they are grieving the years that passed under the shadow of that misunderstanding. They are thinking about the moments when you might have needed support, but instead received suspicion. They are remembering the times they could have asked you directly what was happening, but chose to trust someone else's version instead, and that awareness begins to reshape their heart. Chosen one. When truth finally enters a person's conscience like this, it creates a hunger for clarity. They want to understand how everything unfolded. They start revisiting the conversations that once shaped their perception of you. They remember how certain phrases were repeated again and again until they began to feel like facts. They realized that the person who presented themselves as a messenger was actually guiding the narrative. What once looked like harmless commentary now feels like manipulation. They are beginning to notice that whenever peace tried to form between you and the family, someone would subtly introduce doubt again. A comment about your intentions, a question about your loyalty, a reminder of a moment that was interpreted in the worst possible way. Each small remark seemed insignificant at the time, but now they see how those remarks built a wall, brick by brick. Chosen one. This is the moment when a person begins to see the architecture of division. They recognize that the conflicts in the family did not grow naturally, they were cultivated. Someone fed the environment with suspicion until it became the language everyone spoke. And when that realization settles into the mind, it changes everything. Your family member is now looking at the individual who shaped that narrative with different eyes. They are beginning to notice inconsistencies in their behavior. The concern that once sounded genuine now feels rehearsed. The sympathy they once expressed about your actions now appears strategic. The mask that once looked convincing is starting to slip. And when a mask slips, it reveals more than the face beneath it. It reveals the motive that was hidden all along. Chosen one jealousy has a way of disguising itself as concern. In families, it can appear through subtle comparisons and quiet resentment. When someone senses that another person carries favor, influence, or spiritual clarity, it can stir insecurities that are difficult to admit. Instead of confronting those insecurities honestly, some people attempt to control the narrative around the person who triggers them. But God has a way of exposing motives that people believe are safely hidden. Right now, the family member who is awakening is beginning to recognize that much of the criticism directed toward you may have come from a place of insecurity rather than truth. They are remembering the times when your successes were downplayed or when your boundaries were portrayed as arrogance. They are seeing how the very qualities that made you strong were interpreted as flaws. And suddenly, the entire story looks different. Chosen one, you must understand the spiritual significance of this moment. The enemy believed that if he could isolate you long enough, the misunderstanding would become permanent. He believed the narrative would solidify into something unchangeable. But heaven does not allow deception to dominate forever. There is a passage in the Gospel of Luke where Jesus says that nothing concealed will remain hidden and nothing secret will fail to come to light. That truth is not just poetic language, it is a principle that unfolds in real life. Lies may travel far, but eventually truth reaches the same destination. And when it arrives, it carries clarity that cannot be undone. Your family member is beginning to see the fruit of your life in a way they never noticed before. They are recognizing the consistency in your character, the patience you showed even when the situation was unfair. They are realizing that while accusations were spreading around your name, your actions never matched those accusations. That realization creates a powerful shift. Because when the evidence of a person's life contradicts the narrative about them, the narrative eventually collapses. Chosen one, this is the stage where conviction begins turning into respect. The same person who once questioned your motives is now beginning to admire the way you handled the situation. They see that you could have fought back aggressively, but you chose restraint. They see that you could have walked away in bitterness, but you continued to carry love quietly. And that kind of strength leaves an impression that cannot be erased. The family member who once believed the story about you is now standing in the uncomfortable but sacred space where truth replaces assumption. They are beginning to understand that the person they thought needed correction was actually the person carrying wisdom. And that realization is preparing the ground for something that once seemed impossible: restoration. On Chosen one, restoration does not begin the moment someone recognizes the truth. Restoration begins when that truth settles deeply enough to transform the way a person sees the past. Right now, your family member is standing in that exact place. Their mind is no longer defending the old narrative. Instead, their heart is beginning to examine it honestly. And when a heart finally opens like that, humility enters the room. Humility is powerful, anointed one. It is the soil where real change begins to grow. Your family member is now replaying moments they once brushed aside. They are remembering times when you spoke calmly while others raised their voices. They are recalling the patience you showed when accusations were thrown in your direction. They're realizing that while everyone else seemed eager to argue, you often chose silence. And suddenly, that silence looks very different. What once appeared like weakness now reveals itself as restraint. What once felt like distance now appears as maturity. They are beginning to understand that the strength you carried was not loud, but it was steady. And steady strength has a way of leaving a mark on people once they finally recognize it. Chosen one. I have seen this kind of awakening happen before. There was a season in my own life when someone close to me believed a story about my intentions that simply was not true. For a long time, I tried to correct the misunderstanding, but the more I spoke, the more the situation seemed to twist itself into something else. Eventually, I stopped trying to defend myself. I remember sitting quietly one evening and simply praying, "God, you know the truth. Let the truth speak when the time is right." Months later, that person came to me with tears in their eyes. They told me they had started noticing things they once ignored. They realized that the narrative they believed did not match the way I actually lived my life. And in that moment, the entire relationship shifted, not because I forced the truth into the light, but because truth revealed itself. That is the kind of moment you are approaching now. The person who once doubted you is beginning to see the evidence of your character. They are recognizing that while accusations once filled the air, your life quietly continued to demonstrate patience, integrity, and compassion. That kind of consistency is impossible to fake for long periods of time. Eventually, it exposes every lie spoken against it. Chosen one. When someone begins to see you clearly after years of distortion, the emotion that often follows is not just regret, it is reverence. They begin to respect the strength you carried through the storm. They realize that if they had been in your position, they might not have handled the situation with the same grace. That recognition changes the energy between people. The same family member who once felt comfortable questioning your motives now feels a sense of humility when they think about you. They are realizing that while they were listening to accusations, you were quietly enduring pain that would have broken many people. They are seeing that your silence was not emptiness, it was discipline. Chosen one, this is the beginning of something sacred. The heart that once judged you is now softening. The mind that once questioned you is now reconsidering everything it believed. This does not mean every detail of the past will suddenly disappear, but it does mean the foundation of the misunderstanding is crumbling. And when the foundation of a lie collapses, the space it leaves behind becomes an opportunity for truth to build something new. The shift happening right now is not just emotional, it is spiritual. Heaven is allowing someone who once misunderstood you to witness the reality of who you have always been. And once that witness becomes clear, the way they speak about you from this day forward will begin to change. Chosen one. The person who once repeated accusations may soon become the voice correcting them. The same mouth that once stayed silent when your name was questioned may now defend your character when others speak. This is how vindication often arrives, not through confrontation, but through transformation. And the transformation happening in their heart right now is preparing the way for the next chapter of this story. Chosen one. The moment a heart begins to transform like this, the spiritual atmosphere around the entire family begins to shift. One awakened conscience has the power to disrupt patterns that existed for years. When a single person starts seeing the truth, the old narrative can no longer move freely through the room the way it once did. Conversations begin to change. Certain accusations suddenly feel uncomfortable to repeat. The tone around your name begins to soften. This is how strongholds quietly begin to break. For a long time, the misunderstanding around you may have functioned like an invisible agreement. No one openly declared it, but many people unconsciously accepted the version of the story that had been circulating. That agreement allowed the lie to survive. But now, something sacred has happened. Someone inside that agreement has stepped outside of it. And once that happens, the illusion begins to weaken. Chosen one. You must realize that this moment is not just about one relationship. It is about the restoration of truth in your bloodline. Families often carry unspoken patterns for generations, cycles of silence, cycles of blame cycles, where one person becomes the place where everyone else's frustration is placed. Many of you watching this message know that feeling deeply. You were the one who spoke honestly about issues others wanted to avoid, and somehow that honesty made you the easiest person to blame. But heaven never intended for you to carry that role forever. Right now, the atmosphere around your family is being rearranged. The person who is awakening to the truth is beginning to speak differently about the past. They may not yet know exactly how to approach you, but inside their heart, something is shifting. They are recognizing that the story they once repeated is no longer something they can defend. And that realization will eventually change the way they respond when your name is mentioned. Chosen one. This is where vindication often takes a quiet but powerful form. You may not hear an announcement or a dramatic confession immediately. Instead, you will notice small shifts that reveal something deeper. Someone who once remained silent when accusations were spoken will suddenly say, "That's not what really happened." Someone who once nodded along with criticism may now pause and question it. Those moments may seem small, but they carry enormous weight. Because when a person begins to defend the truth after years of misunderstanding, it reveals that their heart has truly changed. You must also understand something important in this season, Anointed One. Vindication does not mean you must reopen every door that once caused you pain. God does not ask you to forget the lessons that protected your peace. The same wisdom that helped you endure the misunderstanding must now guide the way you approach restoration. Sometimes reconciliation begins slowly. A conversation that once felt impossible becomes possible again. A message arrives that carries humility instead of accusation. The tone of someone's voice changes when they speak to you. These moments are signs that healing has begun, but healing is still a process. Chosen one. The same patience you carried during the years of misunderstanding will now become your strength in this new chapter. Allow God to guide the pace of restoration. Do not feel pressured to rush into emotional closeness before trust has time to grow again. True reconciliation is built the same way trust is rebuilt, step by step, moment by moment. What matters most right now is that the truth about you is beginning to breathe again inside the hearts of those who once misunderstood you, and that truth will not remain hidden. The person who is awakening to reality will eventually speak about what they have discovered. They will share how their perspective changed. They will explain the moments that opened their eyes. And when they do, the story that once surrounded your name will begin to dissolve in places you cannot even see yet. Chosen. One, the same family dynamic that once placed you in the role of the outcast is now being restructured by truth. And the person who once believed the lie is slowly becoming a witness to the reality of who you have always been. Chosen one. You have walked through a long season where silence felt heavier than words. You carried accusations that were never yours, and you endured distance that you did not create. Yet, through every moment of misunderstanding, heaven was quietly recording your integrity. Nothing you endured was wasted. Every tear, every prayer whispered in private, every decision to remain calm when your heart wanted to defend itself, all of it has been shaping this moment of revelation. The shift that is happening now is not simply about correcting a misunderstanding between family members. It is about the restoration of truth in a place where distortion once ruled. When God decides it is time for truth to stand, He does not only reveal the lie, He also reveals the strength of the person who endured it. And that person is you. Chosen one. The family member who is awakening to the truth is now beginning to see your life through a completely different lens. They are recognizing that the resilience they once overlooked was actually courage. The patience they once misunderstood was actually wisdom. The boundaries they once questioned were actually protection. This realization is humbling them in ways they never expected. You may soon notice something different in the way they approach you. Their words may carry hesitation where confidence once existed. Their voice may sound softer, more careful. That change is not weakness, it is respect forming where judgment once lived, and respect is the beginning of restoration. But hear this clearly, Anointed One restoration does not mean returning to the exact dynamic that once existed. God rarely rebuilds a relationship exactly the way it was before. When He restores something, He raises it to a healthier foundation. The same relationship that once carried confusion must now be rebuilt on truth. That is why this moment requires both grace and wisdom. Grace allows you to release bitterness. Wisdom reminds you to protect the peace God cultivated in your life during the years of separation. Both are necessary. Without grace, your heart remains trapped in the pain of the past. Without wisdom, you risk reopening doors that once allowed confusion to grow. Chosen One this season is teaching you how to carry both. The person who once misunderstood you may eventually approach you with questions. They may want to talk about what they have realized. They may want to apologize for the role they unknowingly played in the narrative that hurt you. When that moment arrives, allow the conversation to happen with calmness, not with the need to prove anything. You no longer have to prove who you are. Your life has already spoken. The years of endurance, the quiet strength, the refusal to become bitter, those things have already demonstrated your character more powerfully than any explanation ever could. Now the truth about you is standing on its own feet. And as that truth spreads, something deeper begins to happen within the family itself. The pattern that once made you the target of blame is losing its power. The same atmosphere that once felt heavy with suspicion is slowly clearing. People who once looked at you through someone else's interpretation are beginning to see you through their own experience. Chosen One. This is how generational patterns begin to break. For years, the enemy attempted to isolate you because isolation weakens influence. But what he intended for separation has become preparation. During the years when you felt alone, God was strengthening your heart, refining your discernment, and teaching you how to stand without needing validation from anyone else. Now that strength is visible. The family member who once believed the accusations is beginning to see that the person they misunderstood was actually the one carrying clarity. They are realizing that your presence in the family was never meant to create division. It was meant to expose it so healing could begin, and that realization changes everything. Chosen One, as this chapter unfolds, walk forward with quiet confidence. You do not need to force the story to correct itself. Heaven has already begun that work. Continue living with the same integrity that carried you through the storm. The truth about you has already started moving through places you cannot see. And from this day forward, the same family that once questioned your heart will slowly begin to recognize the strength, the wisdom, and the light that God placed inside you all along. Chosen One, as this moment comes to a close, take a deep breath and recognize what heaven has already begun to shift around your life. What was hidden is being revealed. What was misunderstood is being corrected, and what once felt like rejection is being transformed into divine vindication. This is not simply a moment of emotional relief, it is a spiritual turning point. The God who saw your silent endurance has now stepped forward as your defender. The truth about you is rising like the morning sun, and no shadow of deception will be able to cover it again. You are standing in a kairos moment, a divinely appointed time where heaven is aligning events, hearts and circumstances in your favor. May peace settle over your mind. May healing reach every place where betrayal once left a mark. And may wisdom guide every step you take as this new chapter unfolds. If this word resonates in your spirit, chosen one, take a moment to seal it with a simple declaration in the comments. You might write Amen or My vindication comes from the Lord. Sometimes speaking agreement is the very act that strengthens faith. And if you feel led to continue walking with this community of watchful hearts, you are welcome to subscribe so you do not miss the next message meant for your journey. For those who also wish to support the continuation of these words of encouragement, a small offering through the support link helps keep this mission alive. Remain watchful, remain faithful, and remember, heaven has not forgotten you. Your time of restoration has already begun.